How do you write a French CV? What's the difference and what are the elements that you need to include? Today I'm going to talk about four things that we should include on a French CV. Ebony Minor 2639 asked that question in the comments and I thought it was a really great question and so I'm answering it today. So we're going to talk about the length, like diplomas, education, languages, and how to handle the visa question. Quick intro if you're new here. I'm Diedre. I'm a Jamaican living in France for over 9 years now. I work in HR for a tech company, and part of my job is supporting foreign hires through their visa paperwork, applications, renewals, etc. And outside of work, I coach women on their move to France. And if you didn't know, I am also a foreign employee. So I do know both sides of the coin. So we're going to look at French CVs and how are they different or what are some like little tips. I want to give you about four tips that you should make sure you include. And the first thing is the length. French CVs are generally just one page, two like maximum, but they're really French CVs tends to be really quite short. One page if you're like entry level, even mid career, and two if you're really, really senior. But even so, it's usually just one page and it's organized quite like differently. So a lot of CVs that I've seen, especially from foreigners, not in this job, but in a previous job, used to be like really long, like listing all your internships. And those are important, but it's how you organize them and how you organize like your certificate or what like conference or projects that you work on. And so recruiters that I know don't really read past page two. And so they do stop at page one. They've shared this. I don't know if like that's the global thing, but I've had recruiters, people talent acquisition specialists that did share this. It's one of that is part of like perspective. So they might not be thinking, oh, this person is so accomplished. They might think it might read to a French person that you have a problem with prioritizing and organizing if it's like this. So on your CV, like make sure it's concise, you have all of the information, but it's going on one page. And if there are roles that you've outgrown, you can just put one line or maybe put it in a different category to highlight the competencies. And while you're here, if you're watching this, I think you're probably already like deep into researching your move to France and you're not just like somebody who is like dreaming about it. You're really considering your move to France. So if this is you and if any part of you is still trying to figure out like the big pieces, or like which visa or how you try to find a job, what region, etc., then I do have a workshop that runs that covers these very, very questions. It's called Move to France, the Essentials and I run them monthly. I will leave the link in the description for the next one. You can check it out when you're ready. But let's get back into this CV and all the things. So the first thing I already talked about is that the length. Keep it one page max. That's like the best thing for you. There's another part which is linked, and I think it's around, diplomas and your education or your skills and competencies. And so for many times, like a Jamaican CV, or I've seen some of my American friends with their CV, education is like at the bottom of the last thing. In France, you want to put your education at the top. Don't bury your education at the bottom. You put it at the top, or maybe you put it at the side, but it's at the top of your CV. So in France, it's the opposite. You want to put your education at the start, and then also like very specifically, France uses like abbreviations and different ways to describe the level of your degree. And so it's based on how many years after your high school diploma. And so the high school diploma is called the baccalaureate or the bac. And usually it's like bac plus 3 years. So it means that after your diploma, your bachelor's degree would be 3 years after your diploma. So bac plus trois. So bac plus three. Bac plus trois means this is your bachelor's degree. Bachelor of Science, Bachelor's of Arts, whatever. Because in France, the bachelor's degree is 3 years, not for like in the US. If you're American, if you're not, you might be accustomed to a 3 year bachelor degree. And so you put bac plus trois And then for master's degree, masters in France are 2 years. And so it becomes, so you have bac plus three, bac plus trois for your bachelor's. And then you add another 2 years. So three plus two is five. And so if you want to indicate that you have a master's degree, you put bac plus cinq. So bac plus five, and that means it's your master's degree. And so I think that's like something that is quite particular to France. And then if you're at the doctorate or PhD level, it's bac plus huit, so bac plus eight, because usually it's a roughly 8 years after your high school diploma, your baccalaureate, is when you get your PhD. And so just remember that when you're highlighting education and like your degrees, you want to use this code to make it simpler and easier, because this is what they use. So bac plus three, bac plus trois. It's getting hard for me to say it in English. I'm so used to saying it in French. Like saying it in English sounds foreign to me. But bac plus three, bachelor's degree. Bac plus trois, licence. Bac plus five, bac plus cinq, master's degree, master. Bac plus eight, bac plus huit, it's your PhD or your doctorat. Okay. And you want to put that at the top of your CV, or kind of, or like close on the side, but at the top as well. Not like, don't stick it at the bottom. So it's not wrong to like to say masters or PhD or whatever. It's just that it makes it easier because this is the cultural practice of saying bac plus trois, bac plus five, etc. So when like a recruiter is like skimming through CVs or etc., they're not having to translate all of those things. And then I think what we often see in French CVs as well is usually the competency, so your skills, kind of like at the top, or some sort of like objective statement. This is still a thing in French CVs. The third thing linked, I want to talk about languages, and it's languages with the CEFR levels, right? And so every French CV has a language section. Many, you might not have this, or might not be accustomed to this because your CV is in English, but France and Europe in general, but France is quite a multilingual and quite a multilingual place. And so, especially, it's also to your advantage if you want to put different languages. And then, actually, when I first moved to France and I started doing, and I was doing my master's, I felt like, I don't know, quote unquote, one of those monolinguals, you know. Even though I spoke my dialect, I spoke Jamaican Patois, which is its own language, and then I also spoke English, and I also knew some French. I mean, I was not fluent in French, but I knew some French, right? I still felt like I was behind everyone else because everyone else had like already three or four languages, because one parent is French, the next parent is, I don't know, Hungarian, and then they grew up in Italy. And so that's just like three languages right there. And then they studied English in France. So English through school. And so that's just four languages. I felt the same as well when I was living in India, because Indians just tend to, naturally, they'll speak multiple languages. I think like being in a place where multilingualism, is that a word? But being multilingual is a lot more common than I was used to. Putting your language and the different languages that you speak and the levels is a lot more common and like commonplace, and a lot more expected than I was used to. And so that was something that stood out for me. And even now, just in general, you just always have your languages. And even if you don't, you also want to share, if you're a native English speaker, you also want to share that you are a native English speaker. And then you also want to put your level of French. And it doesn't matter the role, but you always include languages in on your CV. And in general, you will use the CEFR scale. So it's like A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. To simplify, A1 is just like pretty much you know the very, very basics. You can say bonjour, you can introduce yourself, you can say, my name is, je m'appelle, Diedre. And then and that ranges from A1, A2. And then when you get to the B level, then this is the B1 begins where you're able to like go through daily life. And B2, I would say it starts like, it's like the threshold of when you could really comfortably say that you can work professionally in France and in French with a B2 level of, French. For sure, you're able. And so that means you're not just able to express yourself using like daily languages or going through daily activities in French, but you can also take that a step further and process thoughts, have process more abstract ideas, have debates, tackle different conversations that are not just about your daily life. You also understand business terms, etc. So at the B2 level is when really you would say that you're professional, you're competent to handle French and to operate in French professionally. And then C1 and C2 is just basically fluency. And so C1 is like the start of fluency, and C2 is like you're really quite at the bilingual stage. That's a good way. You also probably want to take the DELF exam to really have a certification on your language level. But usually you want to include this kind of like description of the levels in French. Of course, you can say it's conversational, intermediate, professional, proficiency, etc. Like you can say this, or you can use like stars, 4 out of 5, to say like you're fluent, or 3 out of 5 to be like you can handle professional settings in French. But the point is that you make sure that you include whatchamacallit, you include languages on your CV. And if you're able to express that in the CEFR level, so A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2, then it makes it much better. But don't like lie. Like, don't put your C1 if you're a B1. If you're really A2, B1, so like, yes, you understand some daily conversations, but you still struggle quite a lot. Don't put that you're a B2, because B2 has a level of fluidity and fluency that comes with it. That if you're just about to enter at the B1 level, it would be very quickly they will know that your French will not be like up to par. It's not matching with B2. So like don't switch things, but it's also important to say what your language level is, because if you don't include French in it, they might more likely to just assume that you don't speak French at all, and so your only language is English. So put all your languages and put the level, and do the same with English. Like even if like put, if you're native, then you put native English speaker. If English is not your mother tongue or your native language, then you want to also include the levels and include all of the languages. It's really, really a commonplace thing. It's also expected. It also helps to build your profile. The fourth thing that we're going to talk about is the format of the CV itself, like how French CVs look. They tend, for me, they look a lot more different, and they still use photos at the top, like right or left. Photos are still very, very commonplace on a French CV. Yes, yes, there are like anonymous CVs where you don't put the photo, and you take off like all of your identifying information. Anonymous CVs were a lot more common even 16 years ago. So like in 2009, when I was in France, 2000, people were already sending in anonymous CVs, and it became like more of a conversation, a topic of conversation of like, should you or should you not do your CVs like this? But even so, photos on a CV persist in France. And so I would say it would be better to put your photo on the CV, but it's not like it's not mandatory, but it's really, really quite practiced. And then in terms of like looking at the format itself, so yes, include your photos. And then the personal information section is again at the top. You want to put your name, your city, like where if you're based in France or wherever you're based, you can put your country or whatever. And your contact information. You don't always, it's always great to put your, so you don't need to put out your exact address. Like this is not necessary, but you want to at least say where you're based. So your name Diedre, based in France, based in Paris or something, and then you put your email and your phone. Some people only put email because they prefer to be contacted in this way, but I think it's a lot simpler if you include your phone. If you are overseas though, so if you're not in France and you're doing the application, then I would say take off your phone number. But again, it's also like up to you. But for sure you have to have at least an email in there. And then the section headers are like pretty standard. You want expérience professionnelle, so professional experience, formation, so training, competence like skills, langue, languages, centre d'intérêt. So your hobbies or your interest. It is like pretty standard to include these. And I find it quite endearing that it's still included on CVs in France. And like your hobbies, your interests, etc. I think many foreign candidates like almost skip this part, or they choose to like remove this section to create more space for like experience or opportunity or training and that sort of thing. And while I understand that part, I think it's oftentimes a point of interest or a point of conversation on French CVs where you include your hobbies or your interests. So centre d'intérêt, so your centers of interest, your hobbies. Don't leave it off. It's usually conversational for the interview, etc. It's a way to help break the ice, especially if you have like pretty interesting ones. I don't know if it like helps to push your CV further because it is going through the ATS first, the applicant tracking system first. But I do think it humanizes you on your CV, and that's something that French employers still appreciate. And then search for, in terms of format as well, just use a French template, like use a French format. You can find in Canva, you can use Europass is one site that uses it. Like search for a French template to see what it looks like, and then you'll be able to like look and see the differences of like my CV just like this. Oh, that's what they look like, to see what the format is. Yeah. And then considering the format as well, the bonus part is the visa question. So for visas, this is one of the things that I do get asked about quite a bit. And it's like, should you put your visa or your visa status on your CV? And here's my answer as someone who works in HR in France and goes through the hiring process and also gives support for hiring foreign employees, right? From the paperwork status, if you already have work authorization, absolutely include that on your French CV for sure. If you already have, so it could mean that you are a student in France and so you're able to, so you are authorized to work, or you're already, for whatever reason, or maybe you have the passport talon. This is mainly, oftentimes, if you have work authorization, you're already based in France, or you have a good way to start. You're going to be meeting family, or you're getting married, or you're paxed with your, partner in. who will be in France and you'll be there. And so you will have your work authorization. But the point is, once you have work authorization, absolutely include it, because this just short, like you'll just get pushed to the front of the line, the foreigner candidate line. You'll just get pushed towards, like, put it at the top of your CV, make it clear, etc. Like, you don't have to spell out exactly what it is, but you can just simply say like eligible to work in France or something like this. It removes that kind of like friction everywhere. If you do not have work authorization and you will need sponsorship, like, don't lie, but I wouldn't lead with that on the CV. Sometimes you have job application systems that will automatically ask you, do you need sponsorship or not? Like, answer well, and don't necessarily lie. It's not always yes, it is a filter, but it's not always a filter towards rejection if you say that you don't have work authorization. But if, for example, you don't have that question on the when you're applying for the job, if you're outside of France, or even if you're in France and you don't have work authorization yet, don't put that on your CV, because that would filter you towards rejection. So if they don't ask, you don't put, if you don't have it yet. There is the CV is the point of the CV is to get you the conversation. Yeah, because there are roles that would getting sponsorship or getting work authorization can be a relatively straightforward situation. And so if you put need sponsorship or don't have work authorization, then you might be creating like kind of like panic where there may not be, depending on your role, especially if it's for like a mid-career job. Right now, the way work permits are organized, it can make it a lot more straightforward for and not a problematic or not a stressful situation to hire a foreigner and get work authorization. So a company can do that relatively quickly. And so if you want to understand more about this, then you can either, you know, pick my brain and ask me one of a direct question, or you can go through my blueprint, your friend's blueprint strategy session, where we highlight and go through your specific situation to relocate, to really understand some more your file. But going back to the CV, if you don't have work authorization, I wouldn't put it there unless they specifically ask you for it. If you do have work authorization, absolutely put that you're eligible to work in France. So to close all of this and summarize, we talked about length. And the length is one page, like really, really one page. Download a French CV format, and so that you can see how they're organized. They're pretty good at organizing this. Put the diplomas near to the top. Use French terms to describe the kind of degree that you have. So bac plus trois is bachelor's, bac plus cinq is master's. Like, include that, include the different languages that you speak, and if you're able to use A1, A2, B1, B2 kind of like language to explain that, do it. The format signals that you've adapted, so make sure that you format your CV in the French way. Include a photo. It helps to, and also include your hobbies. It's just like one line. It doesn't need to be like anything simple, anything complicated, but just include those, and that helps to humanize your CV in a good way. And then for a visa, like I said, if you have work authorization, absolutely include it. Just to say, eligible, put it at the top, eligible to work in France. And then if you don't, then I would not lead with that. Yeah, because a French CV isn't like, and also in terms of language and format itself, if I have a bilingual CV. So if it's 2 pages, it means that one page is in English, one page is in French. Make sure you have your CV in both. I think it helps a lot. It also helps your case to show your proficiency in in French, but it also makes it easier sometimes for the recruiter to go through and to read through because they're able to choose the version that makes sense for them. So if you're able to translate your CV, then do that. Of course, if the job is in French, your CV should be in French. Don't apply to a French job post with an English CV. If the job is posted in English, then yes, you can, of course, lead with the English CV and you can apply fully, for sure, apply with an English CV. Sometimes people will accept the French one, but not the other way around. If it's in French and you post the English CV, you're less likely to get to the next stage. But if it's in English and you post with a French CV, I think it's also because they're able to understand much easier your CV than the other way around. But follow the language of the follow the language of the job post. So whatever language the job is posted in, put your CV in like that. Because you will have jobs listed in French, and they will in the job description it will say that the language, the daily language of work is English, or they need somebody who is native in English and French is not needed specifically for that job. Like I've seen that. So like I said, it's just because a job is in posted in French does not mean that you're cut off from using English. But you want to apply with your CV in French if the job is in French, regardless of how much English you will need for that. But that's it. Thanks to um, Ebony Miner 2639 for such a really interesting question. Great question. And so hope you'll understand some more and get a better understanding of what French CVs look like or how they are. And if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. I read all of them and I will respond. I'm Diedre, and I help women move to France to live the life that they desire because they deserve it and you deserve it. Ciao.